Hey, pork chop. So recently I got a couple. You all right there, buddy? So recently I ended up getting a couple feeder pigs, and we know we're going to grow these out. They're going to grow out pretty quickly, probably within 4 to 6 months, somewhere in there. And I ended up buying 1,000 pounds worth of feed for these pigs. So then I ended up kind of getting in a situation where I had a whole pallet full of feed. I needed some way to be able to store that feed, you know, to keep the mice and the critters and stuff like that from being able to chew into the feed bags and get to the feed. So that got me thinking that I needed a solution. So today I thought maybe I'd share with you what I'm doing to store different types of animal feed here on our homestead. So we have several different types of animals, several different types of feed, and we have several different types of way that we're storing our feed right now. So I thought we'll go look and see what that is. So when we first started getting livestock, the first thing that we bought to store our feed in ended up being galvanized trash cans. So trash cans, any trash can you can store feed in. One thing you're going to want to look for is a tight lid. Most of these galvanized trash cans do have a fairly tight lid. They will loosen up over time. And the good thing is, the way the handles work, you can put a bungee cord over the top of them and kind of tie the lid down. And that'll help kind of keep any raccoons or anything from being able to lift that lid and get in there. So if you're looking to store feed in a trash can, you will want a tight fitting lid. And these galvanized trash cans, I think they work fine. The one thing that I think that the galvanized trash can is good for is better than other trash cans is because it has a flat bottom. There's a very flat bottom in here, and you can use a scoop and you can scoop out all the feed out of these trash cans, and that makes it really nice. Now over here I have a trash can right there. That trash can is you can store feed in it as well. It has a very tight fitting lid. It's actually very hard to get that lid off. But the bottom of the trash can has big like grooves in it, and it is kind of impossible to be able to scoop all the feed out of the bottom of that trash can. So I'm just using it to store bags of grass seed in, is what is in that trash can. So when you're storing bags of feed, you know, in a container, I think roughly a good number to go by is somewhere around 9 pounds, or I'm sorry, 9 gallons is about roughly what you need for a 50-pound bag. I can't talk this morning. So this 20-gallon trash can over here will fit 2 bags of feed. This is a 31-gallon trash can. It will fit 3 bags of feed. Now that's kind of just a rough estimate. Now different types of feed have different volumes. So like a lighter feed, I think a rabbit feed has a lot bigger bag, and you're not going to fit 2 bags, 50-pound bags of rabbit feed in that container. It's just because it's a lighter material, it takes up more volume. So that kind of roughly that 9 gallons for a 50-pound bag, that's just kind of a rough estimate somewhere to start. Each type of feed is going to be different. So a couple other ideas on ways to store feed is, you know, you could always just use a tote. This is a very large tote. It does have a lid that clips on, and the way that lid fits on, it's kind of impossible for mice to be able to get inside of there. And this tote right here, I'm not sure what the size of that is, but I can fit 2 50-pound bags of feed, unopened bags of feed. I can just lay 2 full bags of feed unopened in this container and put the lid on, and it will keep the mice from being able to get in there and chew through those bags. So if you want to store a full bag unopened, I think that one of these, like if you find one of these larger totes, you can find one large enough that you can at least fit 2 full bags of feed and store them in there. I mean, just a container, basically, to be able to keep the mice, basically just mice, from being able to get inside of there. This does have I guess little padlock things on the side. You could zip tie this lid shut or put a carabiner on it, and you could probably keep the coons out as well. Another idea would be a bucket. So this is actually a good sized bucket. This is a 6-gallon bucket, and we have sunflower seeds in this bucket, and this is more of a treat you can feed it to our goats, we can feed it to the chickens. But this right here will fit more of a 25-pound bag of feed. So if you have something that you buy just for treats or something occasionally, a bucket like this can work out fairly well. And what we have on the top of the bucket, the lid is actually a gamma lid. It's a screw-on lid. It has a rubber gasket so that will make it watertight. But basically this lid, you just unscrew, and then you can get inside to the sunflower seeds, which there's not very many left in there. But so my wife buys a lot of animal crackers that she gives the goats and the pigs and stuff like that. And something like this is perfect to be able to put animal crackers in, maybe dog biscuits, something, a little bit smaller that you may not buy as much of, maybe some scratch or some bird seed in something like a bucket. So one more thing that you can store livestock feed in, and I'm not saying an oak barrel, even though probably an oak barrel would work if you were creative enough. I'm sure you could use that. But what I was going to say is actually a pet food container. So they make containers specifically for dog food and cat food. And this container here claims that it can hold 100 pounds worth of feed. And it is stackable. So it's made for another one to stack on top of it, so you can store your feed kind of all nice and neatly. Now, personally, I don't know if this will hold 100 pounds worth of, chicken feed or anything like that. But what I do know is that bag right there is a 50-pound bag of dog food, and it has that bonus 4 pounds in there, so it's 54 pounds of dog feed, and that pretty much maxes this thing out. So it's pretty much, there's not much room left over when you put that, after you put that bag in there. But it does work good for us for our dog food. I'm sure this could work good for animal feed as well, probably as long as it's in a secure location and raccoons or something couldn't get to it. It would be able to keep the mice out. Now, one thing I will say is these pet food containers may be expensive. I know that they make some that are better and more secure, that have like the screw-on lids, kind of like the gamma lid, kind of like the bucket that I showed you. But you'll probably find that if you're trying to go cheaper, you probably could buy a trash can cheaper than you can buy one of these pet food containers. So when I ended up buying 1,000 pounds of pig feed, that ended up being 20 bags worth of feed. So you could see that that's going to take 3 bags of feed for one of those 30-gallon trash cans. That's going to be quite a bit of feed. I'm going to need about 7 of those trash cans to be able to, if I'm using trash cans to store that feed. So kind of the next step up is going to be a 55-gallon drum. So I got a couple of 55-gallon drums. I would have bought another one if they had another one, but they only had 2. So these 55-gallon drums, they do have a removable lid, so you can unclamp it, open it up, get your feed out, seal it back up. Now this is very animal proof. This will keep out all your mice, coons, and everything out of a barrel like this. So this is probably the most secure method to store the food on a small scale for like a homesteader. So a 55-gallon drum, I can roughly say for me, for the pig feed, it fit like 6.5 bags of feed per 50-gallon drum. So those 2 barrels right there fit 13 of my bags of feed. So basically 3 barrels will pretty much get me close to 1,000 pounds of feed. And when you're buying in bulk and you want to try to get a discounted price, you're going to probably be buying a minimum of 1,000 pounds. Some places maybe 600, but so if you're looking at buying in bulk, probably 3 or 4 barrels is going to be a good choice to be able to store your feed in. Now, so far I've been getting all my feed out of trash cans still, and I haven't dipped into the feed that's in those barrels. Now I will say the barrel is a lot taller and it will be harder to reach the bottom. So these 31-gallon trash cans that I had over there, at least I can reach the bottom of those. So I'd say the farther down you get in one of these barrels, at some point in time I'm probably just going to end up taking that barrel and then dumping it into a trash can so it's easier to get to, because it will be hard to reach the bottom if you end up using a barrel. So there's one more method that you can use to store feed, probably at a fairly low cost. So if you can pick up a old deep freeze. I actually had an old deep freeze that was sitting here, and I gave that away to a guy I worked with, and he used it to store feed in. So You can see this is a small deep freeze, and it actually would have quite a few gallons worth of storage space in that. But if you can get like a 5-foot deep freeze, you can store a lot of feed. I would think that a 5-foot deep freeze would be getting close to 2,000 pounds worth of feed that you could be able to pour into that if you poured it in. And I'm sure that you could just stack the bags in there if you wanted to. But this deep freeze is actually working. It does have deer meat and some the strawberries and stuff that we picked this year. That fruit and stuff, that's all stored in here. But this is just to give you the idea. So what they did with their deep freeze, the deep freeze they actually got off of me, is they put it at the back of their barn so they could back their truck up to it. So then their tailgate would come up to about, here on the freezer, and then they would basically stand in the back of the truck and pour from the back of the truck. They just open the bags and they would pour them in there until they, they got all their feed inside of that deep freeze. So it's deep freeze is insulated and it is pretty secure. I don't think you're going to get an animal lifting the lid on a deep freeze to get inside of it. So it is secure. It is insulated, so it probably actually helps with condensation as well. That's what I'm going to assume. So when you get a metal trash can like this right here, if it's out in the weather and you get the freezing and thawing, if it's sitting on the ground, actually, and not on a pallet, like right now, if you let that sit in the ground, it will draw moisture from the ground, and that you will get a little bit of condensation in the bottom of that trash can, and you might get some feed clumping up that you need to throw away. You will get that on these thinner containers, and I think in a deep freeze, it probably will help actually keep your food a little bit drier just because it's insulated and it won't condensate with as the temperature rises and lowers through the day and the night. So that's another thing you might be able to pick up. You probably get an old deep freeze off Craigslist, or one that's not working that somebody wants to get rid of, maybe even for free, and be able to even store 1,000 or 2,000 pounds worth of feed in that deep freeze. Well, guys, that's the ways that I've stored feed here on our property. There's a lot of different good storage ideas out there for being able to store feed. I got one more that I'd like to show you, but I can't. I don't have an example, but I can try to explain it to you. So basically, some people will take a couple sheets of plywood and they will build like basically a plywood box. It could be like a 3-foot cube or a 4-foot cube box. And then you can build that on top of a pallet just like this, and then you can basically fill that full of feed. You can store your bags, entire full bags in there, or you can dump your bags in there, and basically you can treat it like a deep freeze. You would have to build it, but once you put it on a pallet, you would be able to move that around with a set of forks on a tractor, and you could actually move it around if you needed to. But that's another interesting idea. You can probably pick up a couple sheets of plywood for about $60 and be able to put those together. You might need some 2x4s for some bracing or something in the corners, but you could build yourself a plywood box, and that plywood box would probably hold close to 1,000 pounds worth of feed. Depending on how big you build it, it could even store 2,000 pounds worth of feed. So that's one more idea if you're looking for ways to store your feed on the homestead. If you're looking at ways to be able to maybe buy in bulk and buy several bags, 20 to 25, 30 bags at a time, you're going to need some way to store those bags so that your animals, so that the critters, like I have rabbits and raccoons and mice and chipmunks, and I have all these different things, groundhogs running around, and you want to be able to keep them from being able to get into your feed bags. If you look at this barn, you can see light all the way around the edges. So, I mean, this barn is not a secure location. So I need a secure container to be able to store my feed in. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. So these 55-gallon barrels are probably the most secure way you could store your feed and be able to pretty much guarantee that they're gonna stay dry and gonna stay, that no animals can get into them. I mean, these things are bulletproof. They're pretty much like bear-proof. So I guess they're pretty much the Yeti cooler of feed storage for homesteaders. So if you're wanting to store your feed and store it dry and secure, 55-gallon barrels. I gotta get some more of those.